Base Set Charizard, the holy grail of Pokemon card collecting. If you know anything at all about Pokemon, you know that this is the card to have. But is it really all that? What's up guys, Pokémon here, and the answer to that question is, well, maybe. But anyways, welcome to the next episode where today, we'll be taking this iconic 1999 Base Set Charizard card and turning it into a beautiful, modern full art. We'll be completely redoing the art in Procreate, and then, using the method I taught you guys in my how to make a shiny custom Pokemon card video, we will also be making it into an actual, physical card that you can really hold. So, if that sounds exciting, then without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so when thinking about this drawing and creating the sketch, I obviously want to take a heavy amount of inspiration from the original art, but I still want to take my own creative liberties as well. I wanted someone to look at this card and immediately say, oh, that's a Base Set Charizard, but I also wanted them to recognize that something is clearly different here. I wanted to have that nostalgic, but also modern touch, if you will. Kind of like those custom Game Boys with those sleek new shells and upgraded IPS screens, but still housing the same internals as a device from the 1990s. So I think you guys can start to see a lot of that inspiration for the original artwork coming out now, as our drawing slowly starts to come together. Now for the body position, which we just completed, I wanted to make it slightly different, as you can see. The original one is simply facing straight forward, which worked well back then, but for a full art, I thought it might be kind of boring, so for mine, I placed him on a bit of an angle, and also made him look like he's kind of levitating or flying off the ground a little bit. Some things though, I definitely did not want to change much at all, like these wings that we're working on now, but also the tail, the hands, and especially the neck, which I thought were some of the most iconic parts of the design, and that my Charizard would lose its identity without. You could definitely not have a Base Set Charizard without that arched neck spitting out flames, could you? And speaking of which, the neck was relatively straightforward, but the head actually gave me a lot of trouble. This is one of those things that I did change because I still wanted to make my Charizard unique, so even though his mouth is still wide open and you could definitely see the inspiration, the shape is completely different on the head, and I could just not get it right at all. After quite a lot of adjusting though, I did end up getting it to a place where I'm happy with it, so I think I'll cut out most of that and you'll see where it is now. So after a lot of liquefying and adjustment, I think it looks pretty good and we're ready to move on and finish the rest of the sketch. From here, it should be relatively smooth sailing as we've already finished the most complicated stuff and what's left is really not too bad at all. So now, we're moving on to the hands. Originally, I actually wanted to make these the exact same as the original art too. After I completed them though, I just felt like something looked off, especially with that right hand, so I decided to redo it. I erased all of my work and started fresh. Quick tip for you guys, as an artist, it's important to never get too attached to your work, especially in the sketching phase. Everything should be fluid and everything can be modified or even removed if it doesn't look good. Now, this is a double-edged sword because also, you don't want to spend way too much time fixating on one tiny detail which, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter much at all. So, in other words, make sure you work smart. And in this case, I think it turned out great, and now we're finally moving on to finish this sketch. Actually, we're nearly there now, so I'll finish up the second wing, which of course is still taking inspiration but also different from the original. And after that, I'm going to sketch out this flame that's on Charizard's tail. I'm not sure if you guys knew this, but this flame I'm pretty sure is very important, and if it goes out somehow, that means Charizard is dead, so I guess there's a little bit of dark trivia for you guys. But that's a little bit off topic, isn't it? And at this point, you might think that we're done, and we almost are, but I forgot to fill in those details on Charizard's head. I guess I was so eager to move on from that point after I finally finished it that I just didn't do it, so let's go ahead and do that quickly, as well as some extra little details, and with that, we're done the sketch and finally ready to begin outlining and filling in the color. So now that our sketch has fully come together, you can see that it was actually a pretty detailed sketch. I've personally always just done them like that, and I think it really pays off here in these future stages. But anyways, now onto the outlining. What I did here was start by decreasing the opacity of my sketch layer, making it slightly more faint. This just makes it so that I can still see the layer, but it's also a lot easier to go over and trace. And then, on a new layer, I'm doing just that, and outlining everything in a more pronounced black ink type brush. Now in the Groudon card I made not too long ago, that one actually did not have a black outline at all. But since the original Base Set Charizard, which we are using as a reference of course, does actually have a black outline, I just decided to do it here as well. There's really no right or wrong way to do it, and the question of whether to have an outline or not to have an outline is really more of just a stylistic choice. It's up to the artist of course, and it can look nice either way. In any case, I think the outline works very well on this card, so I'm glad I did it. And as we continue here, the whole process is really very straightforward, especially again because of that detailed sketch, so I'm essentially just tracing over it and polishing off the lines, making them look very nice and smooth. So now that we're done with the outlining, it's time to move on to the color. But before we do any actual shading though, it's always nice to fill in a base layer, so for that, all I'm doing here is simply outlining everything, yet again, and then I'm using the fill tool to fill in its respective color. Honestly, there's not too much going on here, and I don't want to worry you guys too much, so I'll simply go ahead and speed this part up for you guys. Oh, and there's one more thing, and quite an important thing too. Something that the drawing definitely would have looked a little odd without. That's right, you may have guessed it by now, but it's a flame. Imagine. We can't have a Charizard that's not breathing fire, can we? But anyways, I'm just gonna go ahead here and fill in the basic shape, and we'll quickly get this flame caught up to the rest of the piece. I can't believe I forgot it, but I suppose it's better late than never. And there we go. Now that that's done, we're ready for the real fun. This is where our drawing finally starts to feel complete. It looks nice now actually, but it doesn't look very real. It doesn't have much depth or personality, so we're about to change that. And this is my absolute favorite part of the art. That is the shading, or I guess you could still call this the coloring. But anyways, what I'm doing here is using my color wheel to choose lighter and darker shades, and then blending those into the base layers of color, which we've obviously just put down. Now, to be honest, a lot of the stage is really just trial and error, as I simply put down colors and mess around with them until I think it looks good. I blend them with other colors and blend those into the base layer until I think it looks like it belongs. You'll also notice that my style is very exaggerated and sharp, especially with the shadows. I like to make my darks dark and my lights light, even in situations that might not warrant such harsh shadows as these. I just love to do it this way, and I think it adds a lot of emotion and intensity. For me, I think this always works well, and I definitely don't think it was a mistake here either, as you will see later on. Now, on a side note, this process, which we're using today, is actually not so different from the very process that the actual Pokemon card company uses over in Japan to create real and authentic cards. Very much like us, the very first thing they always do is have to decide what Pokemon to draw. This is actually a lot more important and complex than you might think, because you also have to remember that each set has a very large number of cards, and the sets before it also have a similar large number of cards. You wouldn't want to keep reusing the same Pokemon over and over and over again, and you also don't want a set filled with very similar Pokemon because that would be kind of boring, wouldn't it? In other words, what you want is variety, because that's what's exciting. All this that I just said though, I suppose it doesn't apply to Charizard because you can never have too much Charizard, and I think the Pokemon company agrees with me on this one because he's in like every other set, and never fails to fetch the highest price on eBay, so the people obviously love it. But anyways, the next step after that is the actual illustration, so that would be the exact step that we're doing now. The way this is done in the Pokemon company is that the artist is usually given some details about the card they'll be creating, so maybe the kinds of moves it will have, any emotions that the card should convey, or even a backstory if the card has one. The artist then goes to work creating it. This can actually be very difficult, specifically with unreleased Pokemon, because there aren't many references to work with, but I can only imagine how much more difficult this would have been back in the base set days. For example, when the original base set Charizard was created, Charizard was not nearly as solidified or iconic as he is now, and really, all the artist had to work with was the original pixel sprites from Pokemon Red and Blue, so that definitely would not have been easy. And finally, when the Pokemon card company is creating a real card, the last step is to playtest it. Now that we obviously won't be doing because our card won't be used in tournaments, but this is actually a very important phase of a real Pokemon card's creation. Now, the way prototype cards are created is by placing stickers on top of real cards to make them usable in decks, which actually is pretty similar to the custom cards we've always created, but anyways, once they've been played, feedback is given, such as minor nerfs to attack damage, and whatnot. Cards are rarely broken since the Pokemon company is quite experienced, but if there is a broken card, it's hopefully caught here and fixed right away so that it never has to ruin someone's experience on a real tournament. So that was pretty interesting, and who knows, maybe one day you guys will see Pokemon as an illustrator on an official Pokemon card. That would definitely be a dream come true, but getting back into the present, we've nearly finished all the shading on our Charizard card, and we're just working on these flames now, so we'll finish that up and get into the next step. And there we go, we're all done with the Charizards, so now I'm actually going to add some glow effects to the fire to make it really stand out. And to do this, first we're going to duplicate the layer, then simply add some Gaussian blur to the subject until it looks about to the level we want. Then we're going to hit hue, saturation, and brightness, turn the saturation all the way up, the brightness down, and adjust the hue to the color we want it. After that, I'm going to go back to the layers and change it to an add layer. And with that, it's done. You can already see that it looks different than before, but I'm also going to do this exact same process all over one more time to give it a bit more of a pronounced glow. And once that's done, I'm simply going to combine the layers and there we go. This looks awesome. This will look especially great against the holo foil when we create the card. And it was at this point that I'm doing something I probably should have done a lot earlier. That is, actually testing how my card will look inside the template, and, well, we've got a bit of a problem here to say the least. I should have known, but Pokemon cards are obviously pretty narrow, and that fire we just drew looks pretty much non-existent on this card, so that's gotta get fixed. Fortunately, it's not a crazy fix, and it's really good that I caught this early on, so using the Liquify tool, which I found to be essentially God's gift to digital artists, I'm going to adjust the shape until it's the correct size. That would have been pretty terrible if I had to redo the entire thing, but it's alright now. And also, now that that's done, I found that when I placed the card in the template, the bottom looked a little bare and empty, so we need to add something exciting there, and I've got just the idea. How about if we added a bunch of glowing flames? I think that would look really cool, again, with the holographic effect, but also as a backdrop against the attacks and whatever else is at the bottom of the card. On top of that, the original base set Charizard's entire background is flame, so I guess it's only right if we're remaking it to have this little addition. So, same process here as with everything else, outlining, coloring, and then adding a glow effect to it, so I'll get back to you guys when it's all done. And now that we've fixed our mistake and even added to the card, all the stuff to do with the illustration is the background, so let's go ahead and start that. Now, since we already have some flames at the bottom of the card, which we obviously just added, I didn't want to make the rest of the background red as well, like the original art. I just thought that would be way too much red, so instead, I opted for something like a cave. Caves usually have pretty harsh shadows, so our Charizard looks just at home, and of course, I think a cave is a pretty cool setting. So, we're gonna start with some light in the distance, and move on to the darkness of the cave walls on the side. I wanted to make the upper parts of the card lighter to contrast with the rest of the card, which is actually pretty dark. And also, again, keeping that holo effect in mind since we will be creating an actual card out of this, but the holo effect does work a lot better with lighter colors, so that's definitely a bonus, and that's definitely a reason I'm doing it as well. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into this time lapse. And there we go. With that, we've just officially completed the illustration for our card. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, but personally, I think this turned out great, and I can't wait to actually hold this in my hand. So to do that, we've got to create a template. So this part is actually pretty straightforward and really shouldn't take us too much time at all. I've still got that full art V card template left over from my Groudon card, so let's go ahead and place our artwork inside and adjust it until it looks good. Once it's in a good position, I've also cut out some parts of the card which I want to extend outside the border, like the flame for example, so let's go ahead and place those as well for a bit of a depth effect. We'll also take this opportunity to go ahead and add some minor details into our card, such as some of the energies. But now that that's done, we can save this and add in the text. Now for this part, I will be placing a real Pokemon card over top of ours, and using it so that my text can be at the exact position it needs to be. Honestly, I think this is the easiest way to do it because you could place your text at exact pixel distances, but honestly, who's got time for that? And once the text is done, we will now take this time to also add in any finishing touches, such as the name of the illustrator, which is, of course, me, and also the ability icon, the single strike icon, and whatever else. And after that, we're officially done. All there is to do with the card and its artwork, and now, all that's left is creating the card in real life. So the first thing I did here was download my card, and then place it on a Google Docs to properly size it for printing. This is not a tutorial, so I won't be going into too much detail here, but if you do want that is a tutorial, then just go ahead and click the first link in the description below. It'll take you right to that where I go into the process and explain absolutely everything I'm doing in great detail. But anyways, we've got our card sized here to 6.3 by 8.8 centimeters. We've placed 9 of them on a sheet of paper, and now it's time to print it on transparency paper. I took mine to Staples yet again, and here we go. I think it turned out awesome. I then cut them all out, which I will of course spare you guys the trouble of watching such a tedious task as that, but now it's time to sacrifice a reverse holo card to use for our new Charizard. So here we go. We'll begin stripping this card with our 100% pure acetone, and honestly guys, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel guilty whenever I had to do this. Especially because Riolu is actually one of my favorite Pokemon, but I suppose it can't be helped, and it's not like we're wasting this card here. We're simply taking something that was previously forgotten in a box somewhere and we're turning it into something new. But anyways, this is done outside of course, and once all the ink is stripped off, we are left with only the pure holo. Quite beautiful, isn't it? It's always cool to see what's underneath a Pokemon card, but now, using our spray adhesive, I'll go ahead and spray this card and stick that Charizard over top. I can already tell that this card is going to be special, but before the glue dries, we will quickly adjust it so that it is the perfect fit, and with that, once the card is fully glued on, we're done, and we've just created a modern base set Charizard card. So thank you guys so much for watching this video where we created a custom, reimagined, full art base set Charizard. Honestly, I'm super happy with the way this thing turned out, and I really think it looks amazing. I know this video was a bit different from what we normally do here, and it was definitely more art focused and less tutorial focused than usual, which is what I was going for, so let me know what you guys thought of it. But anyways, again, thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.